Next, let's continue the bindings on our view inspection job page. So here within the object header, we want to bind a few properties. Let's first just set the icon to add equipment, and then we'll bind the number of our object header to our equipment days until check variable. So here we can add the text due in and then days afterwards, and we'll just bind to equip days until check. Now we can access this property with a slash, because when we click on our generic tile, the data within the tile is passed into our page, and so any children components of our parent page component can access the data with this slash and then the name of the property. So now with that in place, we should be able to test it and see. If we click here, we can see minus 48 days matches up here with the checkout deadline, and here 31 matches as well. So now let's add a formatter for the color of this status. One thing to note is if you are doing text bindings and property bindings in a dynamic expression like this, if you go to do a formatter on it, so here on formatter on the number, the syntax isn't quite set up correctly, and this will cause errors. So don't do this. Instead, let's just bind this single property to the number state. So we'll add the slash and the equip days until check. We can then use the formatter on the number state instead. So then here we can add a simple if statement, which will check if the equip days until check is bigger than 1. If so, return the formatted text as success, otherwise return it as error. So now with that in place, we should be able to close down the formatter, head to our app, and we'll see that now this will be reflected in a red or a green color. Let's also bind our object attributes here. So the text for our equipment name will be our slash equip name. The part number will be slash equip part number. And then we can also add a title for these two components as well. As here, without adding a title, it just shows the properties, but instead we can add a title, equipment name, and part number. So now we can see what these two properties are relating to. Okay, great. Now we are ready to start building in the logic for each of our 4 inspection details here. We'll start with the comments, as this will be the most simple of the 3 and doesn't require a building block to work. So to set everything up here, let's first grab a VBox. So this will be our VBox comments, and within this we'll want to add a button and a text area. So the button and our text area. This button will be to save the comment, and the text area is for the comment to go in. Now remember, since we put this inside a VBox, both of those will now be stacked components within the comments here. However, since we copied and pasted from this icon tab bar to this one, we actually need to change the properties here and turn off these 2 falses, so then we can access the tab filters and whatever components may be inside them. So now we can see our button and our text area. For our save button, let's add an icon and some text. Now, at this point, let's jump back into our JavaScript functions. Let's scroll down and we'll see within our function here that we're building this inspection data section. And what this will do is check if any inspection data is already present. If so, it will populate the section and mark it as complete. There's a flag here as well, which will be set to true by default. and it will be set to false if any data is not present. So now for each section here, you can see I've set up a section for the comments, for the pictures, for the barcodes, and for the signatures. Let's start working with this comments section. And what we'll do here is set up an if-else statement. So if else. And inside the if, we want to perform two checks. First of all, if the data.inspections comments is equal to null, or, which are these two parallel lines, and we'll copy and paste our check, and we'll check if the inspection comments is equal to an empty string, then we'll know that the data doesn't exist here. Otherwise the data does exist, and we need to make sure that we put it into the section within the application. So let's build out the logic for both of these sections now. If the data doesn't exist, we want to reset the section, and if it does exist, we want to populate it. So let's start by populating it if it does exist. So this is quite simple. We'll take our oTextArea component and we'll do a .set value on it, and we'll set the value to be the data.inspection comments. We'll then set our button, so our oButton save comment. We'll set the type to accept, which will turn it green to show the data is already there, and we'll also set the enabled property of the button to false, so the user cannot click it to save the data again. We'll also set the text area itself we'll set the editable to be false, so the user can't change the data within the comment. And then finally, we'll set the tab comments view. So this tab here, which will be holding the comment components, will set the icon color to positive. And this is important as it is what we'll be checking further down the line to see if the data is present here or not. If the data isn't present, we're going to want to reset all of these properties here. So essentially, we'll be setting the text area to an empty string. We'll be setting the type of the button to default instead of accept. We'll set the enabled property of the button to true, so the user can click it. We'll set the editable nature of the text area to true, so the user can type in it. And we'll set the icon color of our tab to default as well. Then finally, we want to make sure that we change this flag. So if the data isn't present, we'll set this to false. And that's it. That's our first comment section set up. Now we can test this. So we don't have any comments present for either of our two inspections here. So let's just go back into our table browser. We'll open the inspections table, run the query, edit, and then we'll add a comment for one of the two inspections. Now if we refresh our app, we'll see that the wind turbine has a comment on it. So we can check both bits of functionality now. So here I can open and we can see the comments, and I can enter anything in here. If I go back and I click on this one, we can see that it hasn't actually checked to see, and it hasn't made the changes. And that's simply because I've misnamed one of these functions or one of these components. You can see text area is not defined, and that's just because I've called it text area comment here. So all I need to do is come in here and I can actually use this feature where I can search and replace. So if I search for text area, I can replace every instance of text area with text area comment, and that should fix the issue. So now I can save, activate, we'll come back in here, no issues, open this, and now we'll see that the text area is grayed out. I can't make any changes, I can't save it, and the comments tab is green. Now let's set up the save press event here to actually save the comment when it's entered on the page. So to do this, we'll open the press event of the button, and we're going to perform a check. We'll say if our o text area comment dot get, and then we can always check here whether it's value or text. In this case it's value. If it's not equal to an empty string, then we'll perform our logic. Else, if it is an empty string, then we know the user does need to provide a comment. So we can enter this message toast code snippet, and we'll say, please provide a comment. If a comment is present, then we'll want to do the following. And we can copy and paste some of this logic from here. We can set our button save to the type accept, and we can set enable false. We'll set the text area as editable false as well. So all just copying and pasting code. We'll set the icon color to positive as well. And then we'll call our check if ready to submit function. And this is a function that we'll build after we've constructed the rest of our initial function here, so the rest of this populate inspection job page. So for now, we'll just comment this out, and we'll come back and uncomment this when it's time to implement this function. But for now, we can leave this as is, and we can check. If I come in here, I write test, and I save, then that's going to blank everything out, and I can't make any additional changes. Fantastic. So next, let's import the picture building block, which is going to be the camera building block which we downloaded earlier. Now, to get a understanding of what the building block is doing, we can actually duplicate the app designer, and we can open the building block in its own tab here. So if we open, we change the drop down to building block. Here we can see the PWA camera building block we downloaded, and we can run this in its own window here. Now this app consists of 3 sections, 3 panels, one for capturing live stream video, one for capturing live audio, and the final one is for taking and uploading an image. So here you can see I can add a screenshot, and it adds the image into the page. And this is the functionality that we're going to want to bring across to our application. And there's 2 ways of doing this. We can, within our app, right click, open the building blocks menu, and we can add the entire building block. We can just import it here by clicking select. Or, since we're working in the same domain, we can just copy and paste the components that we want. So let's do that. Let's copy and paste this Flexbox camera upload and this camera upload display area component. So we'll copy these, and we can paste them into our picture view tab. Let's also copy across the camera upload JavaScript, and we can just paste that into our resources. Now, this camera upload functionality works in a specific way. You'll see here within the JavaScript that 1 second after the page is created, a event listener is added to the Flexbox camera upload. And this allows us to run a callback function when a file is provided. So in this case, it will just take the file, convert it to base64, and then set it to the image component on the page here. And we want essentially the same functionality in our application. However, the way that we're working with our app means that this particular line of code is not going to work, as it can only find the Flexbox camera upload component when it's rendered on the page. So rather than doing this when the app is initialized and this page has not even been loaded in yet, we're going to need to move this functionality. And it makes sense to move it so that when we click on this picture tab, that's when it will check and find the div on the page and add the event listener to it. So we can use our icon tab bar, and we can use the select event here. And this select event is fired every time one of these tabs is pressed. So we can add it in here to our select event and just check when the picture tab is selected. So let's open the press event, and within the press event here we're going to add an if statement which will check if the O event.get parameters .key is equal to pick, and in this case we're looking for the key of our tab, which is called pick. If it is, then we can run whatever code is inside this if statement, and here we can just copy and paste these two lines. We can then get rid of this timeout function. So now when the app is initialized, this content will be set to our camera upload component, and this is just a HTML string which will set the type of the component to allow accepting of images as a file input. And then after this, the event listener will be added when we select the picture view tab, and then this callback function will be called whenever an image is uploaded. Before we can make an addition to this code, we'll need to add some buttons to interact with the camera upload functionality, as at the moment it's just purely a HTML box which will be hidden from view in the DOM and then just an empty image component. So if we save and activate, we can see that in action. We can see here that within the picture tab we currently have no controls. So let's add them in now. We'll add in a hbox, and within our hbox we'll add a button which will be to save the image, and this button will have save text, it will have a save icon, and then we can also copy and paste the button from the bottom of this app. So this take or upload picture button, we can copy it from the footer of our building block and we can just paste it in here. So now within our picture tab we should have two buttons, one to take and upload an image. On a mobile it will open the camera or the camera roll, but on desktop it just opens your file explorer. And then let's just build in the save functionality as well. So here within the press event of the save, we want to set the upload button to be disabled, so our O button camera upload dot set enabled false. We'll set the type of our save picture button to accept. We'll set the button to be enabled false as well. And of course we'll set the tab picture view set icon color to positive. And then once again we'll get ready to call our check if ready to submit function. Now on the callback event here within our JavaScript camera upload file, this is where we're going to want to add a couple of things. And the way that this works is that we'll want to add a invisible text component. So let's add a text underneath our image, and we'll simply call this our image base 64 invisible placeholder. And it will be invisible as we'll set the visibility to false. And this component is simply going to hold the entire base64 string independently from the image component here. So to make this work, all we need to do is say image base64 invisible placeholder dot set text, and then we'll pass in the full base64 picture. Now, one thing to note is that within the interface currently, the save button is enabled before we even upload an image. So here I can go in and you can see that I can currently save before I even upload a picture. So let's change this by changing the save picture to be enabled false. And then only once we've uploaded an image do we want to say O button save picture set enabled as true. And there we have it. So now we can save, activate, and if we run our application, we can see within the picture tab, I can only upload a picture, and then once I've uploaded it, I can save, and that grays out all the buttons, so I can no longer add any more images. It also changes the icon tab to be green. Now let's jump back into our main JavaScript function area, and we'll build up the same sort of if-else statement here. So let's just simply copy and paste it, remove all of the individual component names that relate to the previous comment section. We'll change this to inspection attachments, which is the name of the property where our picture is stored within our database. So again, if it's not null or it's not an empty string, that's when we're going to want to perform our logic here. So let's first create the logic for if it is present. So what we'll do is we'll set the O image, we'll set the source to be the present picture, and we'll also set the image base64 invisible placeholder text to the same data. We can then set the same properties here that we did when we pressed the button save picture. So let's just copy and paste these. We'll go back to our JavaScript functions, and this will set the upload button to be disabled. We'll set the type of the save button to accept, and set the enabled property to false, and then of course we'll set the icon color to be positive. We'll copy and paste these up above. We'll swap everything around, so we'll say enabled is true, the type is default, enabled here is true as well, and we'll set this icon, the tab color, to default as well. Now here we're also going to want to clear any image that does exist, so oImage.set source, we'll set it to just an empty string. And then the one final thing we'll do here is set the O button save picture once again to set enabled false. And that's it. That's all the logic for the picture handling in place as well. So let's try this out. I'm going to go into the database and manually add an attachment here, which is a full base64 string. And now with that in place, we can save. Let's come back to our application, and we'll check here where there's an existing image. That picture has successfully displayed, and we can't change anything. And of course, if we go back into our empty inspection, here we have the ability to upload the picture instead. One small update to this logic is that the image base64 invisible placeholder is now a redundant piece of functionality here. So we can comment out this line, we can disable the image base64 placeholder, and within our JavaScript camera upload functionality, we can also comment out this line where we set the text to the invisible placeholder. we're using the source of the oImage component, and we're already setting the data there. So later in the script, when we come to collect all of this data to submit it, instead of calling the data out of this invisible text component, we can just call it out of the image source itself. So you can comment out these two lines, and you can disable this component, as it is now a redundant piece of functionality.